Good afternoon, colleagues here in Geneva. Good morning and well, good evening for some of you who are attending it from Pacific, Latin America. We are here at our monthly briefing for the month of June. And as you know, every last Tuesday of the month at 1 o'clock Geneva time, we are trying to summarize what's happened during the previous month. Developments in the month of June have been quite busy, and there were quite a few interesting developments, both in terms of regular digital events, but also some new trends and some new signals about the emerging trends in the field of digital policy. Therefore, today, what we are going to do, as for all of our briefings, we'll try to check our barometer, what has been happening, where the pressure is higher, where the pressure is lower in digital policy. And we will also identify 5 main trends that have been appearing during the month of June. We'll also try to indicate what we can expect ahead of us for the next few months, especially after the summer break. We'll have still busy month of July, and then we'll have a summer break. Therefore, we are starting with basically summary of the main events in June. As you can see here on the PowerPoint presentation, there was an international conference on cyber conflicts in Tallinn. It's a CyCon conference. It's a regular conference, mainly of security, cyber security community. They had a few interesting sessions. One interesting session by Microsoft expert on the Digital Geneva Convention and other issues related to the digital developments. There was a NANOG meeting in Washington. It is North America. I'm always bad with the acronyms, but you can find it in our acronym list. But it is basically the place where the different internet service providers so-called exchange eyeballs. It means how many users you can bring to the major appearing places. Therefore, you come from Geneva and say, okay, I have 30,000 users. Can you give me a better rate on the top exchange points for my 30,000 wealthy users who can bring also e-commerce exercise? It's one big bazaar when they're exchanging what they call it in their terminology eyeballs. Therefore, users of the internet, how many eyeballs they can bring it to the internet. Network operation. Thank you, Richard. Then there was Eurodig Tallinn meeting, UN Human Rights Council 31st session with mainly discussion on freedom of expression. You know the dynamics, how it's going in the Human Rights Council. You have discussions on the freedom of expression and the privacy as a major 2 human rights issues affected by online developments, but increasingly discussions on question of disabilities, child rights and other related issues. Therefore, Human Rights Council is extending beyond this traditional dynamics of freedom of expression and privacy discussion which have been dominating their activities. We had Artificial Intelligence for Good Global Summit here at the ITU between 7th and 9th June, and it was an interesting event, bringing in artificial intelligence community and linking them with the international organizations in particular, but also other players. The question of ethics was in the focus, the question of providing public goods through artificial intelligence, and it ended, as you can imagine, with more questions than answers. And any discussion on artificial intelligence these days ends up with more questions than answers that what we should do, what are the ethical concerns, and the other developments. IGF 2017 had the second open consultations and MAG meeting in Geneva. It was a regular preparatory meeting in build-up for the IGF in December. Versus Forum between 12 and 16 of June. Again, more pro-development, pro-SDGs, SDG-related discussion in the context of ICT. You can find our report where we try to identify horizontal links, how this discussion at the Versus Forum affected specific issues. ETCA Security Week in Nice, Digital Assembly in Valletta between 15th and 16th of June, and we have today with us Dr. Alex Shibera-Strigona, Special Advisor of the Prime Minister of Malta, and he may reflect on the discussion that was happening at the Digital Assembly in Valletta and overall Maltese presidency of the EU and digital issues. Geneva Internet Law School, it's now currently going on. It started on 19th. Barbados IGF and ICANN 59, which will start this week in Johannesburg. This is more or less a list of the major developments, event-related developments during the month of June. Now, next slide. What have been the pressure at our barometer on the global IG architecture? We have increasingly the calls for more regulation on the internet, coming from I would say not traditional circles which were basically in the past being reluctant or opposing more regulation of the internet. There was a call from the UK, France, Australia asked for the more intervention when it comes to, for example, protection of encrypted communication. We'll reflect later on more on these issues. Sustainable development was more or less equal. There was not increasing pressure. There was the question of the ICT during the WSIS forum. There was discussion on the UNGG group of experts. We'll reflect later on. And more or less, there were no major developments when it comes to sustainable development. Security raised in the relevance with the UNGG report, which was concluded the meeting was concluded without a solution last week. We'll discuss it. There is a question of Council of Europe. Council of the European Union launched the initiative to develop cyber diplomatic toolkit. The personal data of almost 200 million US citizens was leaked and uploaded to an Amazon cloud server. And there is a new European proposal related to respect for private life and protection of personal data in electronic communication. Basically, arguing that there shouldn't be backdoors when it comes to the communication. A lot of discussion, including Australian proposal, is related to encryption and protection of private communication. Next. I'm sorry. Then there was e-commerce developments. Quite a few developments in WTO in the preparation for the Buenos Aires ministerial meeting. What should be the regulation of the e-commerce? And we probably can hear from our colleagues here, including Ambassador Trigona, about developments in this field. China adopted guidelines for the sharing economy, which is an interesting document, basically streamlining the developments of the sharing economy in China. And the European Union also issued clearer guidelines on collaborative economy. Terminology, as you can imagine, is confusing. You have a sharing economy, collaborative economy, and there is no clear terminological description of those economic developments. On digital rights, the Special Rapporteur on Protection and Promotion of the Right of Freedom of Opinion published his annual report examining the role of states in undermining freedom of expression. And as we mentioned already, the last UN Human Rights Council focused a lot on freedom of expression online and the various limitations of freedom of expression on the internet. There have been a few blockages in Ethiopia during the exams, and we'll discuss it later on in more details. Next. On jurisdiction and legal issues, one of the main cases which raised a lot of discussion was on the digital legacies. The court case was initiated after the death of the 15-year-old girl, and her parents asked for basically access to her Facebook accounts, and it led to the court case and quite opposite and interesting discussion which will shape the future discussion on digital legacies. On infrastructure, we have the major breakthrough which hasn't been attracting a lot of attention. The Chinese scientists reported successful quantum satellite communication. Quantum computing is becoming a big issue in technological infrastructure development, and they reported successful satellite quantum communication. And apparently China is leading in the quantum application of the quantum computing technology worldwide, and this is the interesting development. Then we have the question of the airlines. For those of you who do not like to switch off while they're flying and they would like to be connected, good news, the new satellites were launched and we may have cheaper, definitely cheaper, and more easier access to the Wi-Fi and the internet while we're flying. And then there is the question of adoption of the IP version 6 on the European countries. There is the major major developments in the field of infrastructure. On net neutrality, we don't have any major development after the last few months pushed by the new administration to change net neutrality rules. This issue is open, it's discussed. The protest is scheduled against the new revision of net neutrality rules in Washington. On the new technologies, the stage is getting complicated as we realize we have the situation of very fast development of artificial intelligence. In the situation when there are no ready-made public policy answers to this development, I would stay away from regulation because it's even difficult to regulate. And recently I had an exercise, very informal exercise with friends of mine, and I said, if you have a chance to regulate artificial intelligence and you have the carte blanche to do it, how would you do it? And we came to the point that these developments are so complex that even if everybody agrees that we need the regulation, it would be very difficult to regulate. I think private sector is realizing that, and they are engaging into discussion with the public authorities to see what can be done and how one can ensure that misuses of artificial intelligence could be limited and how it can serve some public interest. Therefore, that discussion is becoming really intensive, mainly in the United States, increasingly in Europe, not yet in China, although China is pushing quite strongly in the field of artificial intelligence, and it is becoming one of the key players. Therefore, that's definitely a topic that we will be focusing a lot in a forthcoming period, how to manage, how the public can answer the question of artificial intelligence with regard to the jobs, with regard to the ethics, automation of the industry, you name it, and you have it. Next, please. Top 5 trends in digital policy in June. We will now focus on a few issues from the barometers and underline the few developments. Next. The first one, last week, as you may heard, the UNGG, United Nations Government Group of Experts, failed to reach the consensus about the next report. They produced so far 5 reports of this government group of experts, which consist of 25 experts from a wide range of countries, including permanent members of Security Council, but other countries. Switzerland was the member of in this last iteration of the UNGG. They declared on 24th of June that their meeting was closed and they couldn't issue the report. Now, the report of UNGG, I will use now the acronym since I introduced what it means, is important because it carries a high informal value. It is not convention, it is not official document, it is endorsed by UN General Assembly. In the past, especially the last report from 2015, introduced a few norms and few principles, including the principle that existing international law applies to cyberspace. Now, obviously, whenever we have a failure in the UN negotiation, one can ask the questions, why it happened, what is the main reason, and what are the next steps, what we can do. The problem of reaching consensus last week shows that this field is becoming increasingly politicized. And it is becoming definitely the first league, for bad or for good, of the global politics in general. The rise of the relevance came definitely with the developments at the beginning of the year surrounding the US elections, the developments related to fake news, the WannaCry attacks, and other developments, including the proposal by private companies that when they basically ask for help from the governments to increase cybersecurity, including the proposal by the Microsoft to have the Digital Geneva Convention. Last week, there are now speculation why it happened. There are different comments. We have so far 2 comments. We have one comment by Cuba, official statement, where they were concerned that some of the regulations from the cyber cannot directly extend to the on some of the issues on the cyber conflicts, you cannot apply the UN Charter directly, especially to the issues of self-defense. This was according to their statement, their main concern. We are waiting for other comments. There was another comment by the special advisor to the US President during the Cyber Security Week in Tel Aviv, where he basically said, okay, we have now the failure of multilateral discussions. Now we have to look for bilateral and other forms of cybersecurity regulations. Those are so far two, let's say, public and official comments relating to the UNGG meeting. Based on the our following what has been happening, there would be definitely pity to lose enormously good work and substantive work that has happened in the UNGG over the last 12 months. Therefore, I hope that UN and other actors will try to save something out of this report and to use it to keep it alive in a way for the policy discussions and the next possibility to develop it further. That's the first major developments on UNGG. Do we have any comments? We can make quick comments just to make it a bit more interactive before I move to the second developments on private sector proposal for new cyber norms. Any comments on UNGG?
Richard Hill, just a question. Are they going to publish a report that says some people said this, some people said that, or no report at all?
Thank you very much. Canada was one of the members of the GG, and indeed there was no report. My understanding is that the chair will write something for the Secretary General of the UN because he reports to him in terms of how many meetings, what was there. I'm not clear about whether or not he's going to go into the details of these were the proposals. So that part I don't know, but there will be some form of documentation that will come out of it. I agree with Jovan in a way. It's unfortunate because there was good things. There was discussions had advanced on certain norms, on capacity building issues, on there was a third one on confidence building measures. These discussions had progressed in a way in the GG context over the last 4 meetings. That was very interesting. But as many of you know, there's no agreement until everything is agreed on. And so where we hit the road, the bump hit the road was that on the international law issue. But there were some countries there that were also proposing to renege on a previous report that said that we recognize that international law applied. So, you know, it was one thing to say, well, we fully agree that maybe countermeasures is the next step, to say that no, we actually in fact don't even recognize that international law applies. That was, you know, so on both sides of this equation, there were some strong reservations. And I think Cuba in one of his comments was very clear, is that, you know, for some people the report went too far and for others it didn't go far enough. But we still have all of the past reports of the GG that are still there and recognized and valid, and if states want to go ahead and implement the recommendations, they're free to do so. None of this is legally binding in any way, shape, or form. On the US comment, I would say that in fact he is correct that it shows the limitations of multilateral negotiations, but the solution is not necessarily bilateral, it's probably multi-stakeholder.
Thank you, Christina, for a great summary. That was it. Well, we have now all elements. Just on this issue, we have one interesting discussion, which is still probably premature to advance, but we are discussing with the different actors in Geneva, including the Canton International Organization, to see how we can continue this debate on the substantive and useful rules and inputs from the UNGG in the autumn this year. Therefore, we may launch the series of discussion and talks trying to keep alive the substantive discussion, because issues, the problems are not going to disappear. On the contrary, we can expect that they will become even more prominent. Therefore, there is some discussion. We'll keep you updated about possibility. Could you just...
Process comes from the resolution of a first committee, and so the first committee meets every October every year. So obviously there will be probably a new resolution provided. Russia is the leading on this resolution, so they will probably be putting something into this year's resolution to reflect the current status of the GGE, whether they're going to propose a new GGE, a more open GGE, or something completely different. Now I guess all possibilities are on the table. So that's where this process, the continuation of it, will be in October at the General Assembly in the first committee discussions.
And one of the proposal in the Cuban statement is that they will be arguing or supporting idea of establishing open-ended working group at the first committee. It was one of the concrete elements in their proposal. Good. The second, the focus area is the question of the private sector proposing new cyber norms. We already indicated and mentioned the Microsoft proposal for Digital Geneva Convention, which outlines the few, recognize the existing and recognize few new cyber norms for governments in the internet industry. But what's happened during this month was the Google's proposal. Google basically issued a new proposal for the framework, for the cyber framework, which basically argued that existing mechanisms, legal mechanisms for the cooperation in the cyber crime issues are not sufficient. So-called MLAT treaties or mutual legal assistance treaties are very slow. Therefore, if, for example, government of Switzerland would like to have some data from the cyber companies or internet companies, Facebook and Google, they have officially to use the mutual legal assistance treaty to write to the State Department to then pass most likely to the Department of Justice, which issues the warrant, and then allow the internet companies to share the data with the government of Switzerland or any other government which is requesting data. Obviously, that process is long, it's slow. It takes approximately 10 months, according to Google's search and analysis, and Google is under increasing pressure to provide this data, especially after the recent terrorist attacks in Europe. Therefore, they said, okay, we have to do something. And they basically are suggesting some more effective ways of exchanging data. And they are already proposing changes in the US Electronic Communication Privacy Act, which requests the foreign governments to go via Department of Justice. Therefore, they are suggesting something like that once the country is indicated as a country that observes the rules of privacy, due processes, that's a democratic country, then the sharing of data can go directly. In this case, for example, Bern can ask directly Facebook to get data when they need that. And this is another proposal, and I would say this is good news for digital policy, in the sense that major actors are basically moving from the abstract discussion to very concrete issues, because this is a problem for Google. They have to answer the calls from recently London, Paris and Brussels, and they have the legal obstacles to do it. Therefore, the more we have this, let's say, interest-driven or concretely driven approaches, the more we are likely to develop something useful on the global level and to move it beyond the necessarily ideological differences into the very, very practical ways to answering the concrete issues. Therefore, this was the second trend. Do we have any comment on this second trend on the Google development? No, that's fine. The third development, which I already mentioned, is government's renewal call for more regulation. There was, after the UK London Bridge attack on 3rd of June, triggered a call for more regulation on the internet. And the British Prime Minister, Theresa May, said that new international agreements should be introduced among like-minded countries to regulate this question on the global level. We had also the question of Australian Prime Minister asking referring to extremist content, terrorism planning and risk of ungoverned spaces. And he called basically for reduced level of encryption protection by private companies in order to have more access by government authorities to these meetings. And there will be a meeting of the so-called Five Eyes, the countries which have the cyber security and surveillance cooperation, and they will discuss the question how to address this increasingly according to them, high protection of encryption by private companies. There was a cooperation, new cooperation between UK and France on combating cyber terrorist content. New initiative of Global Internet Forum for combating cyber terrorism by Facebook, Twitter, Google, and with some sort of cooperation with the UN, which will work on capacity building and other initiatives. Any question on the government's renew calls for more regulation? Oh, that's fine. We move to the fourth trend, which is the widespread disruption in internet services. I already mentioned Ethiopia and the question of the blocked access to the internet during the national exam. And they basically said, okay, that's enough. We shouldn't allow kids to exchange, to use social media during the national exam period, which is, I know that it was criticized in the human rights community, but I found it along these lines of Google approaches. People had a problem. They realized that they have to ensure a bit of higher level of control of exams, and they didn't find that the best solution. Definitely there are other solutions, but at least this is on the sort of common sense approach. Maybe, okay, after the criticism from human rights community, they will have to adjust that. But it is in a way, with the all negativity of this development, there is some good news that, and it was basically stopped at the end of the exam, which is also good news. It wasn't prolonged. Please, I thought that there will be controversies after this comment.
Just a question, did the banking sector go crazy? I mean, how many, just from trade and economics perspective, if you shut down the internet, the cost to your country must be huge. And for the purpose of just preventing an exam paper from leaking, I think you can apply your own security measures to your Ministry of Education rather than taking this very blunt approach.
Definitely. But this is good news. Probably the banks will call the authorities in Addis Ababa and say, guys, let us talk. This is not the best way to solve the problem, and or invoice them. We had also the Cyber Space Administration of China ordered the internet companies to shut down close to 60 entertainment news accounts. This is in line with the country's effort to counter excessive reporting on the private lives of and gossips about celebrities. This is the official statement about the reason why they were shut down by Chinese authorities. There was the special rapporteur concern on protection of the right of freedom of opinion and expression as expressed in his report during the last Human Rights Council. We heard one comment. If there are no comments, we move to the fifth major developments, and it's court ruling on the placing digital legacies in focus. The court ruling of the German court, the first instance, the Berlin court, and then the appellation court, on the request of parents to have access to the Facebook account of their 15 years old daughter. They wanted basically to see if there was any case. She died in the traffic accident, but they wanted to see if there was any elements of the cyberbullying against her. And the first court, the court in Berlin, ruled that yes, they can have access. There is no difference from the Facebook account from the letters of other documents which were left behind her. And they followed that line of thinking. But then appellation court basically argued no, they shouldn't have access because a contract existed between the girl and the social media company and that it ended with her death. Now, you can imagine how many comments and the ruling, both rulings that triggered. And there are a few questions, from legal questions, and we don't have yet answers. The first question, whether the content uploaded to a social media network remains the ownership of the account holder or is transferred to the service provider, and under which title. This is an interesting question. What we own once we upload data. The second question, whether succession law, which is generally triggered upon the death of a person, applies to such content. This is another open issue. And third question, which privacy consideration, if any, should apply when a deceased person is a minor or when the content can affect other minors? One of the justification of the appellation court was that there were privacy concerns, that through their access to the account of their deceased daughter, they can reveal some sort of private information of other people who were in touch with her. This issue is going to be around, and we are going to have a more and more heated debates, both in the legal community, but in wider policy community. And the question of digital legacy has not been addressed properly. There are some attempts by Facebook and Google to deal with it proactively, but we will have more and more legal cases. Do we have any comment online, Roxana?
What safeguards will be implemented in order to protect freedom of expression and freedom of speech? That's it for the moment.
Well, it is the major issue in the work of the Global Forum on combating cybercrime, and what I can see from the current discussion is it's mainly, there is a general statement that obviously by all companies, by Facebook, Google, that combating the cyber terrorism and cybercrime should not affect fundamental freedoms and human rights. But when you move it to the concrete issues and concrete questions, it's becoming much more difficult to apply. One of the solutions which is emerging is to follow the due processes, to have the robust check and balancing mechanisms that will ensure the protection of human rights, and while also addressing the legitimate concern in fighting cyber terrorism. It's going to be very, very delicate field, and the due processes so far has been one of the proposals which is gaining momentum, because we cannot have a ready-made formula for addressing this issue. I'm sure that Richard will have some comment on this issue.
No, not directly on that. I mean, I think you're right. The only solution is to look on it at a case-by-case basis. Even in the U.S., which has, as everybody knows, the widest freedom of speech that I know of, still there's some things you can't say. If I were to say seriously, I'm going to kill Jovan tomorrow, that's not permissible free speech. That's an actionable threat, and I could be arrested for that. So it's case by case. No, but I wanted to make a different comment. There was an interesting session at the WSIS Forum where UNESCO presented preliminary results of a meta-analysis that they're doing of studies regarding the effects of the internet on radicalization. And actually, from their initial analysis, there's not any significant evidence that this is a significant contributing factor. So it's contributing, but in the same sense that they use cars. Yeah, okay, cars contribute to terrorism because you drive around to reach the place, or you're even using the car directly. But for now, the radicalization, contrary to what many people have said, does not seem to be occurring primarily because they're accessing the internet. It's a contributor, but they were fundamentally radicalized for other reasons, and then they're picking stuff up on the internet. So it's not clear that going after these phenomena of the hate speech on the internet would actually have a significant effect based on that preliminary study.
Then the internet again plays that function of amplifier, but what already exists for different reasons, it's amplified by on the internet. Roxana, is there? Good. Next, please. Well, what we have ahead of us, we have the Security Congress in Hong Kong, 5th Conference on Regulation of the Decent Work in Geneva with the ILO, the future of jobs, the future of work will be discussed. Then G20 meeting, summit in Hamburg. This is an interesting meeting because, for example, G7 produced the Lucca Declaration on the cyber and digital issues, which is quite an interesting document when it comes to cyber security and re-endorsing some, for example, UNGG findings. But it will be interesting how in the wider setting of G20, some of the cyber security and digital issues will be addressed. Would it be possible to find some sort of common ground, especially after the failure of the UNGG last week? Then there will be a high-level political forum on sustainable development in New York, Aid for Trade Global Review here in Geneva at the WTO, with quite a few sessions on digital issues. ITF, International Engineering Task Force meeting in Prague. This is the main standardization body for the internet. Intergovernance Forum US in the United States on 24th of July, Africa DNS Forum, Asia Pacific Intergovernance Forum at the end of the month in Bangkok, Latin America Intergovernance Forum in August in Panama City, and 8th African Peering and Interconnection Forum in Abidjan. There were some people will be busy during the summer. In Geneva, it will be very, very quiet, especially in August. And with this, I think we have just, or we have another slide. What we plan at the GIP, we'll have we had the reporting from Versus Forum. We'll have reporting from the Johannesburg Forum. Upcoming is issue 22nd issue of the Geneva Digital Watch newsletter, which will be issued later on this week. And briefing will be held at the end of August for developments in July and August. Well, with this, I wish you really pleasant holidays. Try to relax. We will have ahead of us extremely busy autumn here in Geneva with discussion on digital commerce, cybersecurity, and other related issues. But before we close officially this Geneva part, I would like to ask Alex to reflect quickly on what Malta did during your presidency, which you are wrapping up, and the digital summit, please.
Well, very briefly, I'll start off with what I've been doing here at WTO. I started a series of seminars on e-commerce in order to create a mandate during the Buenos Aires Ministerial Conference number 11 coming up next December. Jovan was one of the presenters, obviously, and we had a lot of support from all the 28 for the various proposals being made. Yesterday we organized a stock taking at the end of the presidency. It's just 4 days to go. And one current idea moving around is that there may be a proposal for a resolution for a multilateral agreement on no taxation of electronic transmissions, which used to be a resolution from 1998, extended every 2 years, to be extended for more than 2 years, whether it's up to infinity or whether infinity minus 5 million or whatever, and another infinity on the other end, bringing it down to, say, 50 years or 10 years or just 7 years. That is still a moot point. But the idea is that that will be the multilateral agreement chapeau, under which there will be a number of plurilateral agreements to cover, say, e-signatures, on which there is already a regulation inside the EU, e-contracts, on which there is a regulation inside the EU, cybersecurity, on which there is the Budapest Treaty of the Council of Europe, which covers not only the 44 European countries, but also the US, Japan, Canada, Australia, and some others which are Sri Lanka, etc., who are not in the 44 domain of the Council of Europe. And then moving on to rights of privacy, rights of data flow, rights against spam, which the EU, as Richard has just reminded me, had very, open close brackets, dishonestly objected to at the ITU, but it's now coming on board in the WTO, and we may be presenting this for a plurilateral in Buenos Aires. The idea being that the structure will have this overarching multilateral agreement on what is sure, a number of plurilaterals attracting more and more countries to them until they graduate to become part of the multilateral agreement. So this gives time to time, and hopefully we'll be able to have this more fully fleshed out as we go along. The one critical argument I am finding in my lobbying with the least developed countries and developing countries is that by having these regulations at plurilateral or multilateral level approved, there is recourse to the dispute settlement body. So this is not just a General Assembly resolution. It's not just wherever else resolution. We have the teeth of the judicial pillar of the WTO, and that increases protection for the weaker developing, least developed countries. Instead of having to accept whatever rules are being imposed from outside and to object to those rules or even contest a breach of those rules, There's a question of choice of jurisdiction, choice of law, etc., which is too expensive for small states to even contemplate contesting. Take the old Antigua versus USA case, which lasted, what, 11 years, and then it came down to a over-the-table negotiation after 11 years of judicial expenditure. Well, this is why I'm putting it this way. Then, zooming out now, something more interesting is that in the Digital Assembly, our Prime Minister has put forward that Europe ought to be the Bitcoin continent. So Bitcoin, and now what he meant by Europe, whether it was just acting as EU president of the EU or proposing to the rest of Europe this delicious delicacy, is very, very interesting. And I think that what the ITU is going to be doing with its new working committee on Bitcoin and blockchain is going to feed into this. And I'll wind up with the third point only out of all that we've been doing, is that we're handing over to very honorable successors in the e-world, e-Estonia. And they are starting off with a huge summit on the 29th of September in Tallinn on how to remove the blockages of the digital economy inside Europe, how to advance the digital economy to increase digital trade internationally, how to link up the various databases inside Europe for ministers for the interior, for security, because they're all split databases. So who knows? Are we going towards one-dimensional man in the EU?
Well, not clear answer about chances for success in Buenos Aires. Europe as a Bitcoin continent, and from e-Malta to e-Estonia. Okay.
Richard Hill. So I usually agree with my friend Alex, and this time I have to say I disagree with practically not what you said, but the program you're outlining and the favorable things you said about it. I'll start with just a joke. So Europe having serious problems with the euro is now going to replace a failed currency with something that is not a currency, will never be a currency, and will be an even bigger failure. From that point of view, Bitcoin has its uses, but it's not a currency because, among other things, its value fluctuates. Now, you mentioned the dispute resolution boards. Now, theoretically, I agree that is supposed to be a method to protect the weak from the strong. But I think the actual practice of the WTO has shown that it doesn't quite work that way. It's actually a loss of sovereignty for the weaker countries, because let's take the data flow provisions, for example, that are in TIPP and have been proposed for TISA and so on. They say you have to allow free flow of data, roughly, I'm paraphrasing, unless there's some legitimate public policy. Now, some country decides to put some restrictions on. Who gets to decide if it's a legitimate public policy? Well, in the end, the dispute review board. So you're losing your sovereignty. And Antigua Barbuda is a good case. Maybe it has been resolved now. Last time I looked, it was still not resolved. The U.S. lost and didn't implement it. Have they implemented now? I think it's still. They finally made a deal. Okay. On the other hand, the Bacardi rum is definitely not still resolved, and the U.S. has lost that one and refuses to implement the dispute review board. And other countries. That is not just the U.S. that refuses to implement. Yeah, there are lots of countries that refuse to implement. This is not, for once, not an attack on the U.S. from my part. Now, more fundamentally, if you look at the e-commerce idea, I find it shocking that this is being proposed to be negotiated in WTO by states that are always pushing multi-stakeholder discussions and are saying legitimately that we can't hold discussions in Forum X because Forum X is not multi-stakeholder. That's, I think, a legitimate position. But then how can these same states do it in WTO, which is the least open and the least inclusive of any of these organizations? I can get access to, for example, ITU documents, WIPO documents are all public. I can't get access to WTO. If I asked the Swiss government, can I have access to WTO? They said, you must be joking. No, of course not. So you only get leaked documents and stuff like that. So this is very strange. Second, everything is not commerce. I'm sorry. You can always say everything is telecom or everything is intellectual property. Taxation issues should not be discussed in WTO. Taxation is not primarily a trade issue. Taxation is primarily an income redistribution issue. And so that should be discussed in some other forum, which we don't have. Okay. Well, but but taxation or tariff. So if you're saying no customs duty on data, that's one thing, but no taxation on data is something else. But since data is a big flow, I mean, so that's what sort of be saying, well, you cannot collect royalties on oil because oil moves across borders. And therefore, you know, if you tax oil, that's going to reduce efficiency. Yeah, of course it reduces efficiency, but the people who own the oil, they want the benefits from the oil. Now, we all know that data is oil, so you have to look at data from that point of view. If data is a commodity, well, then wait a minute, maybe you shouldn't have free flow because maybe the owners of the data should be compensated. More importantly, I don't think data is a commodity at all. Data, at least some of it, is tied to your personality, and therefore it's not a trade issue at all. It's a privacy issue and so on. And I'm sorry, privacy is not a trade issue. So I think there's a fundamental problem with bringing those discussions into WTO.
Thank you, Richard. It's interesting to see how the different points are mixing. For example, Cuba, who was more for multilateral agreement in the statement after the UNGG, argues for multi-stakeholder discussion on cybersecurity. Therefore, I feel like having the kaleidoscope of digital diplomacy where you think, okay, these people argue for multilateral approach, and then you have multi-stakeholder. There is a bit of emerging digital confusion, if I can say so. Please.
Thank you. If I can comment on that without necessarily increasing the confusion, I'll try. I'm Henning Envall from the Swedish mission here in Geneva, and I follow quite closely what's going on in the WTO and including the ideas floating around on e-commerce that Alex mentioned just here, and the reason that we are not talking about multi-stakeholderism in that discussion is because it's not internet governance. It's because all what we're trying to achieve is to establish a few basic parameters, basic principles that we think increases e-commerce, helps e-commerce, and increases competition in e-commerce, more importantly, and that we believe is something that's beneficial for all, and it's sort of in the same type of reasons behind countries wanting to look good in the global competitiveness index of the World Economic Forum or the World Bank doing business report. You want to show to the world that you're open for business. And if you are binding your openness in the WTO, it's a better basis on which to make decisions on foreign direct investment, for example. Thank you.
Thank you. I joined recently the e-commerce and WTO discussion, and this is the world in its own, and it's important that we bring the cross-fertilization. But what was probably concluding point from this discussion is that there are many things in the motion when it comes to where things should be discussed, by whom, how, in what way. What is probably the more stabilizing element is that digital is less and less, in some respects, unique. It's going mainstream in WTO with all complexities, in other organizations, and this is probably going to be the trend, that we won't have anymore just as your minister once mentioned, there is no digital trade, there is just a trade, or there are no digital economy, there is just digital economy. In that process, there will be many sort of bumps on this road where you cannot just imply existing rules you will need some adjustment. But I think it sets the raison d'etre for our Geneva Internet platform and our discussions. Therefore, we'll be quite busy in trying to comment or make some sort of dots between all of these spaces and forums, and try to see how it can advance some sort of global causes and the question of ultimately peace, development, and human rights. Well, on this high note, I would like to put discussion a bit lower and to really thank you for your contribution throughout the year, and to wish you the nice and pleasant holidays. Try to relax, try to have some free time, try to think about the ways, philosophical ways, while you're enjoying the sun, how to address this complex issue. With this, I would like to invite our local hubs and regional perspectives to continue online. Bye-bye, thank you, have a nice summer. And we can continue with our refreshment here and bilateral corridor discussions, which I'm sure will be interesting after these comments that we have been hearing. Thank you very much. Bye-bye online. Ciao.
Thank you, Jovan, for the roundup of developments in June, and thank you also, Roxana, for moderating the online conversation and sharing the questions and comments with the in-situ audience. For our online participants, please stay with us for the regional updates. A quick reminder, there is a parallel room for our Southeastern Europe hub, so if you would like to join that, the link is posting the link there. So we will first hear the updates from Brazil. We have Luca Belli from the Brazilian hub. He will update us on the latest developments from the region, including the hearing related to the blocking of online applications such as WhatsApp and the bill related to data capping. So over to you, Luca.
Good morning, Jovan. Good morning to everyone. Welcome to our June update on Brazilian digital policies. The month of June started with the public hearing organized by the Supreme Court with regard to blocking of online applications. The hearing was attended by a wide range of stakeholders during 2 days. Brian Acton, the co-founder of WhatsApp, also participated to the public hearing. As you would remind, the WhatsApp was one of the applications that was victim of blocking over the past 2 years for more than 3 times, and the majority of the stakeholders that participated to the public hearing highlighted that blocking of applications may be a disproportionate measures, and judges, when implementing the law, should try to utilize less disruptive measures. Another very important event that happened during the month of June was the approval by one of the commissions of the House of Representatives of a bill that may prohibit any kind of data cap with regard to fixed internet connections. Data caps in internet connections were a highly debated issue over the past year. The approval of such a bill from the Commission has been hailed as a great victory by civil society, but it is worth to be a little bit cautious because 2 more commissions will have to assess the bill before it is voted by the plenary. Another very important step was a second phase of the Internet of Things consultation that was organized by the government during from 6th of June to 16th of June. The purpose is quite interesting. It is to develop a map of all the Brazilian Internet of Things initiatives in order to let the government understand what Internet of Things solutions and providers already exist and what could be the need of those providers in order to develop suitable policies over the next months. Last but not least, the Anatel, the telecom regulator, approved a regulation last Friday that will eliminate the requirement from multimedia communication service licenses for all those providers that have less than 5,000 users. This is a result of a 2-year consultation and process that has been welcomed very much by initiatives like community networks that will not have to request a license anymore, but they will simply have to notify the start of their activities to Anatel starting from this month. This is all for the month of June, and we look forward to speak with you next month.
Thank you, Luca. Luca Belli from the Brazilian hub. We will now hear the updates from the Southeastern Europe from Paul Turcu. So Paul will describe the recent developments from the region, including those related to cybersecurity, taxation, and capacity development. Once again, for those of you from the Southeastern Europe region, there are live discussions going on now in a separate room, and the link is in the chat. So over to Paul.
Greetings to the internet governance community from Southeastern Europe. This month we have seen developments and a few issues in areas like cybersecurity, taxation and capacity development all across the region. To start with, Turk Telecom and Vodafone Turkey have been awarded a tender to deploy and operate a mobile infrastructure in more than 1,400 locations currently not covered by wireless connectivity. The European Commission has endorsed Croatia's NGN broadband plan and found it in line with EU state aid rules. Once completed, the publicly owned infrastructure will be offered for lease to telecom operators. In Romania, a few days after the implementation of Roam Like at Home, a major telecom provider filed a request for overtax approval, citing inability to cover extra costs. Roam Like at Home offers inbuilt bypass mechanisms designed to protect operators' economic interests, and other service providers are already scrambling to mitigate potential losses and abuse. This might be a highly contentious issue in the months to come. Moving on to Serbia, we have seen the opening of the Cybersecurity Nexus, which intends to function as a platform for stakeholders from Serbian institutions, the private sector and civil society to cooperate on shaping the national policy environment. Public institutions in Kosovo have been working on a state strategy against cyber attacks and a related 2016 to 2019 action plan. We also have two central developments from Ukraine. First, the National Agency for Higher Education Quality approved a new higher education standard for the cybersecurity specialization, describing skills, competences, and knowledge to be obtained by students upon completion of their respective bachelor program. And second, the National Bank is considering the possibility of issuing a national electronic currency based on blockchain technology. Depending on the pilot project results, the bank will assess the risks and benefits in order to proceed with a full-fledged implementation. We have more ICTs in Slovenian schools. The Academic and Research Network of Slovenia will implement a 4-year program dedicated to the establishment of ICT infrastructures in school across the country. In Bosnia, thanks to the joint effort of international organizations and local NGOs, an online tool has been launched for reporting cases of discrimination to relevant institutions. And last but not least, in Greece, state institutions in partnership with the Southeast European Studies at Oxford have launched the Greek Diaspora Map, a digital recording and visualization of the Greek community abroad. The map will be continuously updated, and it is also aimed to serve as a tool for the promotion of Greek language and culture. Thank you for your attention. This was only a brief overview of Southeastern Europe. Please visit our website at cdic.net and be sure to subscribe to our newsletter for more details on regional policy developments. Thank you again and take care.
Thank you, Paul, for sharing the updates from the region. Well, this brings us to the end of our June briefing on internet governance. So thank you for participating in today's briefing. And as usual, the recording, the presentation, and the digest will be available soon. A few final announcements. Our summary report from the WSIS Forum, which is the event that Jovan mentioned during the presentation, it is available for download from the GIP, Digital World Observatory, and I'm posting the link here. So that's the link to the summary report from the WSIS Forum. And the June Geneva Digital Watch newsletter will also be available for download this week, and I'm posting the link to that, which is also on the observatory. So as Jovan mentioned, there will be no briefing in July. So we'll see you again in August, and that's last Tuesday of the month, which is the 29th August. So thank you for joining. Bye.